begin this hour with breaking news just into CNN. The Georgia prosecutor leading the state's election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump is now disqualified. CNN's Caitlin Polantz is here with more. Caitlin, what can you tell us about this? This is just coming in the last several minutes. This is a big development.
A big development, and a big development that Donald Trump has wanted for a long time. That case against him in Georgia, the criminal case where it's accusing him and several others of a racketeering conspiracy related to the 2020 election, it's already been paused. Now it's not even backburnered. This is a case that will be dead in the water because the Georgia Court of Appeals is now saying that Fani Willis, the leader of the prosecution against Donald Trump, the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, she should be disqualified from being able to bring that case. The Georgia Court of Appeals is saying that it's a significant appearance of impropriety caused by the conduct of a public prosecutor. That is Willis, how she behaved, how she was speaking about the case, about Trump publicly, about how she was having a relationship with the top prosecutor that was concealed in this, a man named Nathan Wade. All of that previously the trial level judge had looked at and said, Fani Willis can stay on this case. We're not dismissing the indictment, but the Court of Appeals is now taking another look and saying, no, the trial judge was wrong. Fani Willis should be disqualified from continuing to lead this case. It would be a long process, or it will be a long process to replace her, which is why I say this case is dead in the water now without Fani Willis, the person who was leading this case against Donald Trump in Fulton County. And just to keep tabs on how many cases there are against Donald Trump criminally, the other two in federal court, January 6th, and classified documents, those are dismissed. And then the additional case in New York City where he was set to be sentenced, that sentencing is now not happening. So as Donald Trump enters the presidency, each of these courts that is handling a criminal case is essentially removing that issue from him to have to deal with in any period of time in the near future.
All right, Caitlin Polantz, thanks for that added perspective. Let me bring in CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. Ellie, what can you tell us about this case down in Georgia, the Fulton County case alleging election subversion against Donald Trump and a whole cadre of other co-defendants? Caitlin Polantz was saying that potentially this case is just completely dead now. Is that the case? Is it completely dead, or is it possible you could have another prosecutor come in and take it over?
Well, Jim, for all practical purposes, it's over. This case was already in deep trouble because of the conduct of the district attorney, Fani Willis, and now it's all but over. So just to remind people, this is one of the 4 criminal indictments that had been brought against Donald Trump. The allegations that Fani Willis made here and the Fulton County DA's office made here related to Donald Trump's effort to subvert the 2020 election. There are many other defendants beyond Donald Trump in this case. Now, during the pretrial process, Donald Trump and some of his co-defendants alleged that the DA, Fani Willis, had a conflict of interest. She had a relationship, which she later admitted, with Nathan Wade, a person who had been brought in from the outside to be the lead prosecutor on this case. There were a series of televised hearings on this issue last year, during which Fani Willis and Nathan Wade both testified, yes, we had this relationship, but it didn't start until after Nathan Wade became the lead prosecutor. And then with regard to the allegation that their finances had been intermingled because Nathan Wade was being paid a lot of money to work on this case, the testimony was essentially that they split the costs on everything and they did it all by cash. Well, the trial judge here found that there were significant questions about the truthfulness of Fani Willis's testimony. The trial judge said, quote, the odor of mendacity remains around this case. He said there's real questions about whether her testimony was untruthful. That's a quote, untruthful, from the trial judge. But nonetheless, the trial judge said, well, we can solve this if Nathan Wade leaves the case. And that's what ended up happening. But clearly, the Court of Appeals has now decided that's not sufficient. They lay substantial blame at the feet of the elected district attorney, Fani Willis. And now, as a result, this case, it's not quite dismissed, but it means that Fani Willis and her office will be disqualified from handling it. And as a practical matter, it now goes into a sort of purgatory for an undefined amount of time. It's not coming back. It's over.
Yeah, and Ellie, I guess this begs the question, had Fani Willis stepped aside sooner when all of these questions were being raised, when there was all of that controversy, we all covered this, had she stepped aside sooner, handed this off to somebody else, is it possible that we would not be at this point, that case could still be alive?
There are a lot of things Fani Willis could have done differently, I think, to avoid this ruling. Number one, she could have stepped aside way earlier, as you said. Number two, obviously, I mean, she has acknowledged it was a mistake to have an affair with the lead prosecutor on the case, have a relationship with the lead prosecutor on this case. And separately, and I'm looking to see if this is in the opinion, I believe it is, because I know it's one of the issues that was briefed to the Georgia Court of Appeals. The DA made statements outside of court that the trial judge found were, quote, legally improper. For example, she went in front of a church while this case was pending, and she said essentially the reason these defendants have brought these motions, standard legal motions, is because they're playing the race card. And the defendants, Donald Trump and other defense lawyers, argued that that violated the responsibilities and ethics of a prosecutor. And the trial judge, oddly, said those statements that Fani Willis made out of court were, quote, legally improper. And then he did nothing about it. He said essentially, too bad, there's no remedy. So still going through this Court of Appeals opinion, I'm interested to see if they also opine on that as well.
Yeah, and Ellie, I mean, we should remind our viewers this is the case during which Donald Trump submitted himself to the Fulton County Jail for a mugshot. I mean, that infamous mugshot that is going to be remembered by so many of us for a very, very long time. But for all intents and purposes, he is not going to be. He's not going to have his day in court to defend himself against these charges that were coming out of Fulton County, which, I mean, to refresh our memories, Ellie, these were very serious charges when they first came out.
Yeah, so these charges came out, Jim, in the summer, August of 2023, and it was actually the fourth of the four indictments to drop. And what this case charges is that Donald Trump and I believe 18 others, I think there was 19 total defendants, including people like Jeffrey Clark, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and others, were part of what's called the racketeering enterprise. It was a state-level, Georgia state-level racketeering charge, which essentially charged that Donald Trump was at the head of this organization that existed in order to try to overturn and steal the 2020 election. The allegations that the DA made largely overlap with the allegations that Jack Smith made in his federal case in Washington, D.C. That's already been dismissed on a different basis. Let's remember, just to try to keep this all straight, the two Jack Smith federal cases have both been dismissed voluntarily by Jack Smith, because now that Donald Trump's been reelected, Jack Smith acknowledges he cannot proceed with the prosecution. There was a bit of a separate question about the two state cases. They're still arguing over whether the Manhattan hush money case can proceed to sentencing. That's ongoing. And then this is the fourth case. This is the Georgia state level case. And for now, it's not even going to matter what Trump's status is as president-elect. For now, the Court of Appeals has basically taken this whole case off the track. Separately, by the way, they're not going to be able to proceed once Donald Trump gets sworn in on January 20th. So this case was going down the tubes either way, but I guess this expedites it.
Yeah, it's going down the tubes pretty quickly here, Ellie, no question about it. Let me bring in Paula Reed. Paula, you've been following all of these cases as well, and time and again, it seems Donald Trump is escaping his day in court, reaching a final conclusion, a judgment in any of these cases. It's kind of extraordinary.
It's incredible, Jim. I remember 2 years ago and speaking with Trump's lawyers when it wasn't clear if Trump would be facing federal charges. They told me that they were most concerned about what was going on in Georgia because, of course, a state level case is outside the scope of a presidential pardon. They said that was a case at that time that concerned them the most. And as you and Ellie were just talking about, at the beginning of this year, then former President Trump, he was facing 4 criminal cases. And of course, he was tried and convicted in New York in the so-called hush money case. But as of now, it's unclear if he'll ever be sentenced in that case. We're currently waiting for the Judge Juan Merchan, to rule on a motion to dismiss, another effort by the Trump team to try to get that conviction tossed based on the fact that he's president-elect. We know the 2 very serious federal cases that Trump was facing are now going to be or have been dismissed. And then, of course, the only other outstanding question was this case down in Georgia. Now, once the case was filed, a lot of legal experts and my sources on the Trump legal team said this was an unusual way, a RICO case, to pursue this kind of matter, and they were confident that eventually they could beat it in court. But here, it doesn't even look like they'll have to ever do that, because here the DA Fani Willis being disqualified. So a truly extraordinary victory for the Trump legal team's crusade over the past 2 years to just delay on behalf of their client in the hopes that he would be reelected. Now, he is a convicted felon. He was convicted of 34 counts in Manhattan earlier this year, but as I said, it's unclear if he'll ever even be sentenced on those charges.
All right. Hard to keep them all, I guess, in order, but you both done it beautifully. Ellie and Paula, thank you both very much.